Hi everybody, it's Janet and welcome to my channel. I'm sure glad you're here with me today. I'm going to show you the January 2021 My Monthly Hero card kit from Hero Arts. It's a lovely kit and it's full of honeybee and floral images. I invite you to subscribe to my channel. Just click on the red subscribe button. And whether or not you're already a subscriber, when you're subscribed, please make sure that you have the bell turned on. This will make sure that you get a notice when a new video comes out. So let's get into the topic at hand, the My Monthly Hero January kit. This is the stamp set and all the pieces that come in it. And this is the main stamp set. It's a nice large one. It's got this huge floral in it, as well as some honeycomb accents, the 3 bees and a couple flowers, and then of course many sentiments. And it's nice because there's large sentiments and smaller ones as well. Then this is the die set that comes. This is a window honeycomb die, which is really cool. And the other dies cut out the flowers and the bees. You get 6 half sheets of specialty cardstock. There's 2 of each, like this gold, which is very shiny. It reminds me almost of material. And then there's black and yellow glitter sheets, as well as this honey lacquer pen, which is kind of fun. Now, often when I work with kits, I'll do a bunch of pieces before I start, so I have them all ready to go. In this case, I heat embossed all my pieces with either black embossing or gold embossing powder. First, I did a bunch of images on Neenah Classic Crest Solar White, which is Copic friendly. Then I used some vellum in black and also in some gold. And then I also did this large floral in gold, which I think is just beautiful. Other than the very large floral here, I did about 3 sets of every image. I thought I would show you how I colored up one of these bees. They're nice and large, so that makes it nice to work with. The marker colors are in the upper right hand of my screen. And the idea here is you start with a very dark shadow color, then you move to a more form color, then a mid-tone, and then finally a highlight. And in this case, the bee is hunched over, so he's going to be dark underneath and lightest at the top. I did some light shading on the wings with C1, C0, and some colorless blender. You could totally leave it alone if you wanted to. To begin my first card, I cut a piece of that pretty gold cardstock, slightly smaller than an A2 size card, with a die and used another die inside. Only the outside edge of that gold piece is going to show, so I cut it out to reuse the center in other cards. It's just too pretty to waste underneath other paper, in my opinion. So I cut another piece of cardstock to go on top of this. You saw me smudge the glue, and that was just to make sure that nothing leaked onto that pretty gold cardstock. And now I've got a couple other pieces here. I cut black out of a piece of cardstock. It's 3 3/4 inch square, and then I used a die, kind of a stitched fancy die there. For the center, it's a little bit smaller. It's probably 3.5 inches would be my guess square. So that will go on there very nicely and create another little mat that I'll put on the card. Now the next thing is a couple other strips. These were cut with coordinating dies, but you could do this just with any paper and your cutter. You don't need to do anything that fancy. I just happen to have these, so I use them just to get that stitched look. And this is going to go on a card base. It's about 3.5 inches wide. The black piece is 3/4 inch and the yellow piece is 1/2 inch. So you can kind of see how I'm going to be laying out this card. I'll apply some glue here to establish my main focal point on the card front. And then I'm going to glue that strip in place as well. Okay. So I cut out a vellum piece from an EK Success punch, and I heat embossed some gold powder on this with the sentiment Sweet as Honey. I also had that pre-made, pre-prepared actually, flower heat embossed on vellum with gold embossing powder, and I'm going to attach that to my card with a glue dot in the center of that flower. Because the center has a lot of lines going in it from the embossing image, or the embossed image, it doesn't show the glue dot really at all. Kind of disguises all of that. Now I'm going to attach the bee, and I'm going to use that as the anchor for my sentiment. Now again, because the sentiment is vellum, you want to try to avoid using any kind of glue where it can be seen. In this case, I'm going to use enamel dots to hold that corner in place. And I'll use a medium-sized one to attach that between the cardstock and the vellum. This one I ended up tossing. It was scratched, I realized, so I put another one instead. I used in total 3 of these gold enamel dots, which I thought worked very well with the theme of the bee and the other gold paper and cardstock. At this point, all I needed to do was attach this card front to an actual A2 card base. I used black, so that's why I used the black mats in the center and on the strips. And that completes card number 1. For card number 2, I'm going to use pinks to color these cherry blossoms, at least that's what I think these are, with my Copic markers. You can see the colors on the top from lightest to darkest. Coloring on the back allows you to be a little messier with the coloring and not worry about how well it blends quite so much, because you have the vellum in between your ink and the top of your image. So it just kind of helps to make things look a little smoother. If you put too much Copic ink on vellum, it will kind of pool up and look a little strange, and mine kind of did that in the top with that top pink flower. It ended up looking a little bit marbled, and I kind of liked the way it turned out, even though it wasn't really planned that way. Now the leaves I did all on the top of the image. They're small enough so you can blend easily, and I did add a little bit of pink, darker pink, on a couple of the flowers on the front as well, just to deepen them up, because I just thought they were a little too light. Now for my card base, I've got a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 of pink, and then I've got a 4 by 5 1/4 that I cut out of cut with a die. The white piece you see there is just some of the tape that I used to hold down my die. When I die cut it, I just left it there. Wasn't a big deal. I didn't bother to pull it off. Then I dry embossed another piece of cardstock. This is actually then trimmed down to 3 1/4 by 4 1/2, and I'm going to apply wet glue and put that at a little bit of an angle there, just to add some texture. I really liked that particular pattern that I used in my embossing folder. You could use any one that you like. This is 3 by 4 1/4. Again, cut out with a die to get that stitch edging, but you wouldn't have to. You can just trim it to fit. And then just put it down at an angle so you get almost like an X kind of pattern there. I'm going to use my little glue dots again, and I will put those glue dots in the centers of the flowers so that when I put this down, it is not going to show, and they don't show at all. None of the glue dots do. And this is partly though because this is such a nice vellum. This is a vellum from CutCardstock that I hadn't used before, and I'm very impressed with it. It's really nice stuff, very nice and thick, but cuts nicely, and it's pretty translucent. Now there's my sentiment from the stamp set. I just used some pink ink in my stash and attached that underneath my flowers. And then there was a few other places that I thought I needed to add some more glue dots, so I did that. And finally, I'm going to attach this to an A2 sized card base, again in the same pink. And to finish it off, I will use some jewels. These are pearl jewels from Eyelet. And there's a nice variety of sizes in these halfback sticky jewels. I'll use a couple in each corner to finish it off. So though this card kit really focuses on bees, this is an example of how you can make a card that is not at all related to bees. So it really shows the versatility of the kit with that nice floral that's included in it. I began card number 3 by stamping the floral image onto Neenah Classic Crest Solar White cardstock. And this I Copic colored with exactly the same color combos I showed you earlier on the vellum. And you can really see the difference of how vibrant this is on cardstock versus vellum. I'm going to cut this in half, being careful not to slice that leaf that was hanging over the edge. I embossed a piece of white cardstock with a Doris dry embossing folder to get the honeycomb pattern. I used artist low-tack tape to position the honeycomb window die, and I wanted it just so that it would work with the floral piece, and that's how I decided, where to position it. There were a few pieces that didn't cut out. I just left them alone. You could see the indentations, and that worked for me. Next, I got out a laminate pocket, cut it in half, and then sprinkled inside 3 different colors of glitter plus some stars. And I'm running this through my ink machine, and it's going to make a really nice solid piece of material that I can use for my window on this card. Now, the mess I can clean up really nicely and easily with my little lint roller. I hope you see how easy that is and how well it works. Best thing ever for cleaning up embossing powder and glitters. But anyway, here's the final product after I ran it through, and I'm going to cut this down so that it fits over my fancy honeycomb window. I thought it should be a little bit narrower after I cut it, so I trimmed it down just a hair bit more, and that will fit a little more comfortably on that. To secure this, I'm going to use my ATG adhesive, and I'm just going to apply it everywhere I can and avoiding, the actual cut honeycomb pieces or areas, but covering everything else that I can with that adhesive from my ATG gun. This adhesive is really strong, so it will hold this plastic to the cardstock very well. And you can see you get this translucent look with the sandwiched glitter and stars in it. It's really nice. So next I made my window well and also applied foam tape on the edges and all around so that there is some lift to this and enough room for the sequins that I put in to that well to move around when it's shook. And I created my own sequins mix with a bunch of different colors, some chips, and some seed beads. Now I have a piece of that yellow cardstock. I cut it to an A2 size, and I'm using my mat here to judge approximately the center of my card. And I got it really close. I was just a little bit long on the left side, so I easily fixed that. I just took my steel ruler here, and it was just a tiny bit. It was like less than 1/8 of an inch to cut off. And once I did that, it was really very even. So at this point, I decided where I was going to place my floral image again. This is the one that I stamped and cut in half earlier, so I glued that down. Next is my bee, which I put on foam tape and just set it there like it was landing on the flower. Now here is the sentiment that I'm making. This is Sweet as Honey, which is part of the set. And I used Rusty Hinge for this in oxide ink. It's just kind of a pretty golden brown, which I thought was nice with the honey theme. I'm going to use a scalloped circle die. It's got some stitching on it as well. And I'll center that over the sentiment and run it through my little Bira mini die cutting machine. And this will be the primary sentiment used on my card. So I'm going to slip that underneath the floral image there, and I'll be able to glue it. I'm going to just lift it up a little and put some glue under there, and it'll be good to go. Now I'm going to take some of that honey lacquer and apply some dots as accents on this card. So I had 3 in the corner and a few on the sentiment itself. So confession time, when I attached this to the A2 size card base, I smashed some of these dots with my fingers, and where I couldn't recover, I put on 2 large sequins. I did have to recut my Sweet as Honey sentiment, take the old one off, put the new one on, and now I'm adding brand new honey lacquer dots again. So I made it work. Maybe with the sequins it actually looks better anyway. So, I always say there's usually happy accidents. And with that, card 3 was finished. On to card 4, and I'm going to make a rosette, just a small rosette to use on this card. This was made by cutting a 3/4 inch by 5.5 inch piece of the metallic paper, scoring at 1/4 inch, and folding it in accordion style 2 of these 5.5-inch strips together will make 1 rosette. And the first thing I will do is attach it in the center. I also have a couple 1/2-inch circles that I punched out that I'm going to use for the top and bottom of my rosette. And once that is ready in the center, I will attach the ends together. Now you have this kind of accordion style circle to work with. Now, to make this into a rosette, you push it down like that and collapse it so that it kind of goes towards the center. I put some glue down on a craft mat and then position the rosette in place in that glue. Enough of the glue kind of seeped out the top of the hole that I was able to put on one of the circles, and this covers up, you know, where it meets in the center and makes it look prettier. And I'll hold that until it finally sets, and then once it's completely cool, I'll release it and then put another little bit of glue on the back and stick the second circle. Now this just gives you a little bit more base to apply your rosette, but it's not critically needed. You can get by without it. I put a brown gem on the top of that rosette, and now it's ready for my card. So to start with, I am using a piece of that yellow glitter paper. It's 4 by 5.25 inch. So it leaves a little bit of border on my dark brown A2 sized card base. Then I'm going to pull out that second half of the flower that I had used earlier, and I'm going to apply that with glue, and then I've got another of the flowers that I colored in the pinks that I'm going to apply at the end of this one. Now this die doesn't cut out the space between the branch and the flowers, so to compensate for that I used my yellow Copic marker, I think it was Y35, to just kind of make it blend into the background a little more. Now I have a second flower that I'm attaching at the end of this, overlapping it just to make it a little bit bigger for this card, and I wanted that leaf to show a little bit also so that it seems more cohesive. Now here is another sentiment that I made with gold embossing powder, sweet as can be. And I'm going to use a couple of these bees now to cluster together with that rosette. I'm just kind of working on where I'm going to position everything. So now that I kind of know where I want it to be, I'm going to start by applying the glue behind the first bee and making sure to attach the sentiment with that. So now I've already anchored that sentiment in one place. Now you're going to see me put glue behind the rosette, but before I apply that down, I am going to take advantage of the fact that the rosette's going to be covering quite a bit of the vellum on the sentiment. So I'm going to take advantage, put a glue dot behind there, and then that will be covered up with the rosette. And because this is glitter paper, that rosette took a while to set and stay in place. You could also use a glue dot, and I kind of just forgot about the fact that it was glitter, and if I were to do it again, I would use the glue dot. It just took a little bit longer for it to set is all. Now I've got my second bee in place. See, that rosette still isn't stuck yet. So there's plenty of glue there, it just hasn't fully adhered to anything, but eventually it does as it dries. I thought it needed just a little more bling, so I put a couple of those golden brown jewel sequins on the sentiment, and that finishes this card. So we're on to card 5, and it's going to start with another dark brown A2 sized card base. I've got a few pieces that are ready to go. First I cut a large heart out of some of that leftover laminate piece that I had made earlier. I've got a couple pieces of cardstock ready to go, and I had stamped and heat embossed one of the honeycomb images in the stamp kit, and I'm going to attach that as a little bit of an interest piece in the corner of the card. You'll notice I used wet glue here because it's going to be covered by the cardstock, so it doesn't matter that you can see that. Now I'm going to attach these pieces of cardstock. The first one is just a kind of a golden antique-y looking script piece. The second one is already embossed. It comes this way. It's really pretty, deeply embossed, and I thought it would set off my heart really nice. Now to attach the heart, since it's plastic, I wanted to use some good strong adhesive. The glue dots are very strong, and I'm applying those glue dots behind areas where I had the stars. So the end result here is that when it is placed on my card, you cannot notice, you just don't see the little glue dots that are keeping this heart attached to the card. So that works out well. Now I've got another vellum piece that I had pre-done for my sentiment saying I believe in gold embossing powder. And I've also got another rosette. I had so much fun with the first one, I made another one. Now when I made it, I couldn't find the other little circle for the back, so you can see there I learned my lesson though and just applied some glue dots to the back of that to make it stick right away. For this bee, I stamped right onto an extra piece of that yellow glitter cardstock, and then I heat embossed it with black embossing powder. And the end result is just a different look. It's a little more distressed in appearance. Now I'm going to cluster this close to the rosette and to the sentiment. And then the last thing I'm going to do is put a couple buttons in the corner. I have a small gold button and an even smaller mini yellow button, and I just thought that that was the perfect little accent to complete the card. And there you have it, card number 5. So what'd you think? What was the favorite part of the kit for you? Leave me a comment and let me know. I love to hear your opinions. I think that for me, I appreciate those chunky bees that are really easy to color. And of course, I love that window honeycomb die. The whole kit is a great addition to my crafty stash. I really appreciate the time you spend with me. I'll be back soon with another video. Keep the fun going. Here are a couple other videos from my channel that I think you might like.